Hello and welcome to Crafting a Revolution, the podcast. My name is Katie Freeman and I'm one of your hosts. Every week we bring you interviews with makers of all kinds from all over the world, those that identify as female, non-binary, and transgender. This week's guest is Jacqui C. Smith. Illustrator Jacqui C. Smith creates unique artwork that showcases diversity amongst women of color. After graduating from Columbia College of Chicago with a BA in traditional animation, Jacqui headed to Burbank, California to begin her journey as a freelance artist. In the last 10 years, Jacqui's created children's books and illustrations for self-publishers, publishing companies, and businesses, including Duck Studios, Animation, Disney, YWCA, and more. When she's not working on commissions, you can find Jacqui at festivals and conventions throughout Los Angeles and selling her artwork at boutiques and galleries across the US. Also, Jacqui's created 4 coloring books, Know Yourself, a coloring book for girls and women that focus on positive self-identity and relaxation for women and girls of color. It was an absolute joy to get to talk with Jacqui, the first illustrator for the podcast. So yeah, just really great to learn maybe a little bit more about the world of illustrations and how that interacts with her own art and all of that. So it was really great and an honor to get to chat with her. Before hopping into our conversation, I want to give a big shout out and thanks to the patrons over on Patreon. So I first want to thank 2 of the podcast big sponsors, and that's Matthew of Artigiano Serio on both Instagram and online, and then Bonnie of Tool Mom Bonnie and toolmomstore.com. Thank you both so very much for being large sponsors of the podcast. And in addition, thank you to these patrons: Candace, CJ Woodgrain, Lee Runyon, Annette 513 Woodworks, Katie Thompson, Women of Woodworking, Kevin, Lefty's Workshop, Christy Twisted Twine, Jeremy Speece, Sammy Go Sammy Lee, Rachel Moody Makes, Laura Oakley Silk Company, Brandy Studio Obey, Lee the Rainbow Carver, Ellen Little Bear Furniture, and Ethan Carter Designs. Thank you all so very much for your continued ongoing support, helping to produce the podcast every week. If you're enjoying the podcast and would like to support it as well, please hang out to the end of the episode and I will tell you how to do that. Now let's head on into our conversation with Jacqui C. Smith. Well, I would like to start by asking my guests to introduce themselves. Would you do that for me?
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Jacqui C. Smith, and I'm an illustrator, and I currently live in Burbank, California, but I'm from Chicago.
Okay. Chi-town, I can dig
that.
I'm in the Midwest too, but nowhere near as cool as Chicago. So I want to start by asking kind of your bigger story, like from baby Jacqui to how'd you get into, being an illustrator and such.
So I've been drawing since I was really young, and I come from like a fairly creative family. Like my grandmother was very much into arts and crafts. So there was always like some little project we were making or building. So I've always been fascinated with art. And as I got older, I started like experimenting and trying to decide like what type of art I wanted to make. So for a while, I was like, I want to be a fashion designer. And then I was like, I want to be an architect, but I'm really bad at math. And then eventually the social worker at my high school was like, well, you love to draw, you love cartoons. So I really think like animation might be a good field for you. So I was like, okay, that sounds fun. Like, that sounds like such an exciting opportunity. So I went to college for animation. I went to Savannah College of Art and Design for a year. And then I transferred back to Chicago to Columbia College of Art. And yes, I got a degree in traditional animation. And then me and my best friend moved out to LA shortly after I graduated. And I guess like the easiest way to put it is like I was not prepared for like LA living and just being like young and broke, but so like ready and hungry.
Mhm.
So like we hustled our way into like every job like we've ever had. So I worked at Universal Studios in the theme park, which I absolutely hated, but I made a lot of really good friends there. I worked for a blacksmith. I worked at an art studio. I work for a fashion company. Like I've done it all to just to, make ends meet and then also like, get really good like life experiences.
Mhm.
And then I interned at a animation studio in Santa Monica. And then they eventually hired me. And it was like a great opportunity. And I learned a lot while I was there. But I ultimately realized like, I don't want to do this. Like I realized like I wanted to work on my own projects and make my own stuff.
Mhm.
So I kind of just left that behind and started freelancing. So I would freelance like on portraits primarily, but now I've moved into primarily children's books. So yeah, that's kind of how I got to where I am.
Awesome. I feel like probably a lot of that like hustle life experience probably aided in the confidence to like be able to go out on
Oh yeah,
your own.
yeah, absolutely. Like I am a super shy and like very much an introvert. And so it taught me like the people skills that I needed to like be able to speak up for myself and like talk about my art confidently because I had to like practice that and like had to work on it. And networking is a big part of being an artist. Like you have to get out and talk to people. And I have to like, hype myself up sometimes, but like it definitely all those jobs like helped me get to that point, which is awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was you said you like to draw, obviously, because that led to the whole animation type thing.
Yeah.
Maybe you can give us a little bit of reference, if you don't mind, on like the difference between like animation and illustration.
Yeah. So animation is like the movement of images. So it's taking illustrations essentially and then making them move into like a fluid picture. So that's how you get cartoons. And then illustration is just like flat, still images.
Mhm.
So that's basically the difference.
Okay. Why do you feel like why are you drawn more to the illustration versus the animation?
I think at least industry wise, there's a lot more room for personal creativity.
Mhm.
The one thing about working for animation studios is that you're always working on somebody else's project, essentially, and there's not necessarily room for like personal expression. So
Mhm.
you are there to do a job on a show, and that's kind of like what your role is. And when you freelance or you draw your own work, I can work on my own style. I can take projects that I want. I can turn down projects that I don't want. You have a lot more freedom about what kind of art you're making.
Mhm.
So that's cool. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about the process of getting started with freelancing.
Oh, well, for me, I kind of just jumped in. I didn't do any research. I was just like, I like to draw, and people say I should sell my stuff. So I would literally just show up to events that I will find online and set my stuff up. And for a while, it wasn't going very great. And then as I started doing more and more events, I realized, oh, like I need to work on like my displays. I need to work on my marketing. I need to work on how like I'm promoting events if I'm, doing conventions or whatever.
Mhm.
I also need to pay attention to like what merchandise I'm selling, what my price points are. So it was learning how to be a business person in addition to being an artist. And
Mhm.
that was like one thing that nobody told me, especially like in school. They never talked about like the business side of being an artist.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was like the biggest thing I had to teach myself for sure.
That I feel is like And it's so funny because I had an earlier interview before you, and we talked about the business side of art. But that is very much true. It's like that seems to be to me like a glaring miss in art curriculum is like because you are your own business. And so it's like it would be nice, I guess, if it was included in the curriculum of just like general basic business classes.
I really feel like every student, and my parents and my family told me this, but I was young and I was like, I'm not going to listen to them. But they all were like, take a business class or two. And I was like, I could take a business class, or I could take like some weird, fun sculpting class. Like, what's it going to be? And so like, looking back, I should have taken that business class because I was not prepared at all. I didn't know anything about like taxes and like what's the difference between a 1099 and a W-2. I didn't know, like I had no idea. So yeah, all of that was like a learning experience that was rough because I had to pay for it, but you know, I did eventually learn. And that is something that I'm always telling like young people, like your art is a business. Like it doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter where you are in your artistic journey. You still need to think of it as a business if you want to be successful.
Mm-hmm. How did you get into the book illustration part of it?
Well, I've always in the back of my mind wanted to be a children's book illustrator. Like I love children's book illustrations. And I kind of for a long time told myself like, oh, like I'm not ready. I can't do it. And then I think somebody just asked me like, hey, will you illustrate my book? And I just was like, I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't done this before, but you know, I'll give you a really good rate so you can be like my portfolio practice project. And then from there, I kind of just snowballed into like a thing that I'm now known for. But yeah, it's just kind of like taking the first step and jumping into it, doing your research, making you sure you know what your target audience is, making sure you know like what format books need to be in, all the like little stuff that go into being an illustrator that people don't think about necessarily.
Yeah. Even you just saying what format, I was like, I didn't even know there was like a format for this.
Yeah. I know. I'm always like, that's the first thing I tell clients when I'm like asking them questions, because I'm like, okay, now did you do your research if you're going to self-publish? Like, do you know what format books come in? And they're like, what are you saying? And I'm like, okay, let's go back to the beginning. Like, let's go. You got to know like what size book do you want? Like all of those little things like end up mattering when it comes to how your book is going to turn out. So yeah, because I've had people not do that and then they show me their illustrations of somebody else did for them and I'm like, this is wrong. like this is we're gonna have to fix that.
and I mean, I guess you're spot on too. I'm just thinking like I'm on the consumer end, right? So I've got 2 kiddos and we read every night, and so I am a consumer of a lot of those illustration books, and just thinking like I've not ever felt like something didn't flow, but I could totally see like if you didn't have it like formatted correctly, where it's like the picture's supposed to make sense with what's on that page and all of that stuff. Like if it's not laid out correctly, it could feel disjointed, like as somebody who's like consuming that.
And I think consumers kind of know when things are off. They might not know exactly what it is about it, but they will recognize like, oh, something about this like I don't like or is weird. And then as an artist, it's for me to point out like, no, that's wrong. You know, this could be done better. But yeah, it's like kind of trial and error though. You learn along the way.
Yeah. I feel like that would be like a fun thing to do though. Like, because kids
love it.
Yeah, I mean, children's books, I mean, obviously like there's plenty of children's books that tell like true stories, right? But so much of it is like imaginative. And I could imagine I don't know, I would have fun with that, I guess, just to
Oh
like,
yeah.
yeah.
It's always interesting, like the type of stories that my clients come up with, like, and the reasoning and the thought process behind them. And I'm always like, wow, that's so cool that I get to work on this. Like, that's so fun.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How are you dealing mostly with people who self-publish, or do you get to work with people working with like publishing houses and stuff?
So right now it's about 50-50. I have an agent, so I'm represented by the
Mm,
Bright Agency. So they get me all of my like publisher work. And then people who just like hit me up on Instagram are like, hey, I want to self-publish a book. And I'm like, okay, great. Like, let's do it. Because I understand, since I started off with mostly self-publishers, I understand that desire to want to just get in there and do it yourself and make this project. And especially because working with publishers can be intimidating,
mhm.
and it's a hard process to like get your foot in the door. So I get why a lot of people want to self-publish nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I've thought potentially about writing a book, I guess I've always thought like I'd have to go the self-publishing route because I'm kind of like, I don't know, I'm anti gatekeeping too. So a little
Mhm.
bit of the publishing world feels like very big gatekeeping.
Yeah,
Um,
I can see that.
um, so I do want to kind of dive into this idea of at least it's something that I'm cognizant of with my own kids, and
Mhm.
that's like finding books with all kinds of representation and understanding that, like, at least when I grew up, I don't feel like there probably was, but I don't feel like there were as many books out there with a full range of representation.
Yeah.
um do you feel like, as the illustrator, I feel like you have like one of the most important roles in helping to do that, to present
Yeah,
representation?
absolutely. Yeah, I think that would be like one of my driving elements in getting new projects is I want to work on the projects that are about the diversity
Mhm,
and the underrepresented. So I do books about like, deaf issues or disabilities or just being minorities. Like those are the ones that I gravitate to because like, yes, we have come a super long way, but as you were saying, like growing up, like there weren't a lot of like,
mm-mm.
Black books or Hispanic books that really teach people about diversity and inclusion.
Or
And
like you
like
just
the
said, like able bodies
able
versus,
bodies, yeah.
like I don't remember seeing anything like that growing
Yeah,
up.
and it's such a small community. And then like since I do go out and do conventions and stuff, when I go out in public and I have like little kids come up to me and say like, "Hey, I read your book, and I'm deaf, and my mom bought it for me." Like that is such like an amazing feeling to say like I have impacted a child's life in any way.
Mhm.
Like that's so cool. So I want to keep doing projects like that where I think I see gaps in the education of children where it can be,
Mhm.
expanded upon.
Today's episode is sponsored by Athena Outfitters. Athena Outfitters is a quality workwear brand for hardworking women that sells everything badass beauties need to get the job done, from work boots to basics. They curate the toughest essentials made to help you perform. Every piece is handpicked to seamlessly slide right into your daily lifestyle, from rugged and roguish weekday wear to effortless weekend flair. You can fill your closet with gear that can do it all. So for Christmas, I ordered my wife like a very nice pair of slippers from Athena Outfitters, and she loves them. Loves them so much that she has accidentally gone to the gym and the grocery store in them because they seem to never leave her feet. So definitely a place to go check out, go get the goods that help you not only out in the shop, but just in your daily work around the house and outdoors. As a listener of the podcast, you can go to Athena Outfitters website and use coupon code MM, as in M&Ms, 15 for 15% off any purchase. So again, you go to athenaoutfitters.com and use the code MM15 and get 15% off of your purchase at checkout. I'm assuming, like, as the illustrator, you have to take, obviously, like, you have to take the direction from the person who wrote the book.
Yeah.
But do you get any freedom to add in diversity if it wasn't written that way?
So a lot of times, people aren't like very specific when it comes to background characters.
Mhm.
So if left up to me, it's going to be a very diverse crowd. So I think like that is always a thing.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to main characters, like I get to choose like normally hairstyles, skin tones, like
Mhm.
that type of stuff is usually left up to me unless they're like, I want it to look exactly like my child or something
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's usually always room to include some diversity in there. Absolutely.
So please tell me, when you get to make hair choices and skin tone choices, that it always goes darker and curlier.
It does.
Thank you.
It absolutely does. And it's just also just fun to draw curly hair. Like I love it. So yeah, any opportunity that I have, I'm like, yeah, let's draw it in. Yeah.
I am a little bit, I will say you're the first illustrator I've had on the podcast. So I'm like
Cool.
kind of geeking out about this. I want to understand a little bit more about the process. Is it like all digital, or do you work from like paper and move to digital?
Yeah, so the children's books are all digital. And then this is like, I do wood pieces. This is all ink on wood. So I like experimenting with different mediums, but for my like professional stuff, it's all digital because it's way easier.
Are you like one of the like Adobe type users for digital?
I am.
Oh, okay.
It's just easy.
I know. It's also just expensive.
Well, yeah, I have found like the loophole, and it's every year they go on sale. So instead of paying, I have the suite that's like all apps. It's $30 a month if you get it on sale instead of like the $60, which is crazy. So I was like, I could do $30.
That's right.
I'm not paying $60 though a month. Like that's insane. So yeah, I'm very cheap. So I'm always looking for a way to like get around that.
See, I didn't even know they had a time where they go on sale.
Oh yeah. I wait and I look and I'm like, let me get that email. Like it's on sale. Okay. And also another tip is that if you have an account, like say you have the $9.99 a month plan and you go to cancel it, they'll give you a discount so you don't cancel your account. I have done that several times as well. You gotta, work the system.
That's right. I'm all for that. Yeah. And since you pointed it out, because I guess I didn't, from looking at your account, I didn't realize about you said like the ink on wood pieces. Is that like your own art practice?
Yeah. Yeah, I when I was working at the art studio, I inked a lot at the time because that was before I started mostly doing children's books. And so it's kind of like my therapeutic practice, but I also don't do it that much anymore because it makes my hands hurt. So
I can imagine that. Yeah.
It's very time consuming, but yeah, I love doing them.
Do you, outside of the ink work, is there other work that you do that's just for you or just for your artistic side?
When I have time, yes. I'm writing my own book. Well, I've written the book, I'm illustrating it, and that's probably my like passion project, but I don't get to work on it very often. But I also have been working on it for like 10 years at this rate. So we'll see when it gets done.
There someday.
We'll get there someday. Yeah.
curious. I mean, I know you said you've been working on it for a while, but
Yeah.
is it a children's book?
No. So it's like I haven't figured out who this book is for, which is
Okay.
part of the problem. It's weird, which is also a thing that I'm like, I can't necessarily be like, hey, I'm a children's book illustrator, and then I made this super weird book. So I don't know who it's for yet, but I'll figure it out eventually. But it's gonna be good.
You was writing ever a passion for you?
Well, I read a lot. Like I
Okay.
read a couple hundred books a year.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I have a problem. Um, so I've always enjoyed reading more than writing. It just gets so like jumbled in my head when I
Yeah.
try to put pen to paper. So the book that I wrote, I'm super proud of because I'm like, this is actually like really good. Like I wrote that, and it's it's
Yeah.
cool. But yeah, I try to write when I can, especially like to practice, because I do want to get better at it for sure.
Mhm. Are there many uh writers slash illustrators out there
Oh yeah,
that do both? Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah. A lot of, especially like people who go into more the comic side of things,
Mhm.
that's usually their outlet for the writing aspect. But yeah, definitely. I
I
could
was
never
gonna
write
kind
a
of
whole
ask since
comic
you
book.
did. I was gonna say, yeah, since you did animation and now the illustration. I was gonna ask if comics were ever in your um forte or something you would look to.
Yeah, I'm actually working on the illustration side of a comic, but it was written by another woman, and it's called Susan King, and it was written by Monique Fisher. So she's an amazing writer, and I could never come up with some of the stuff she's put into the story. So we're still like pretty early on in the stages of like production and stuff. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's another project I'm working on.
And is that your first comic?
It well, technically no, but we don't talk about the first one. It's my second
Is this a
one.
we don't talk about Bruno situation?
We're just gonna leave that in the past. Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, I imagine, I mean, comics are its own art. Like
Oh yeah.
it's not the same as like a children's
It's
illustration.
not. Yeah. And I'm definitely having a hard time the last couple months, like drawing children's books for like 8 hours a day and then trying to switch to a very much adult
Mhm.
like comic book and at night is rough. Like I am not like most days I'm like, oh, I can't. Like it's weird. But yeah. So I'm like figuring out that balance between the two because they have nothing in common for
Well, and
sure.
I feel like, yeah, I feel like the line work, like I just feel like all of it's different.
Yeah.
Um, and
Even like
this,
the lettering and
yeah,
how you do layout, the entire format is so different.
yeah.
And the way stories are told, like the way you
Mhm.
have to break things down, is yeah, it's a lot different.
I mean, I know on my end, like there's a few comics that I own, but I own them for the artwork,
Yeah.
not for the story. I'm
Mhm.
like, I struggle when my oldest wants to like read a comic at bedtime. I'm like, I can't. Like, this
Well,
is not
also,
a this is not a something you read to somebody. It's not
yeah.
like it's a different.
And it's also it's like so much dialogue based, and then
Yeah,
depending on the comic, some of them are like lengthy, like they'll have like
yeah,
full on monologues, and I'm
yeah,
like, I can't. Like, what is this? What is this
yes,
about?
yeah.
But yeah, yeah, I totally get that. And I grew up reading mangas,
Mhm,
and the like switching from like reading mangas to trying to create a comic, like even those two are so very different that
mhm.
sometimes I'm like, this is weird.
Yeah,
For
yeah. That's
sure.
my oldest is getting into mangas as well.
Yeah.
Um, which is just turned into I say I can't read it to you, and so then he reads it to me, and that works out. Um,
Yeah.
um, but I find that super interesting. Like, do you? like I've always wondered about the people who do the illustrations for comics, like diving into just creating illustrations like that without the dialogue, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
is there even like is that even a thing out there? Because like I appreciate how, again, I like the artwork of comics. For some reason, it's like, to me, they're very, it's, and I know they're not, but it's similar to graffiti to me. Like in my mind, like I feel like that same emotional feeling when I look at comic art and when I look at graffiti art.
Yeah.
But do you think there, like, is that a thing to be just a standalone, like the artwork of comic?
It's super rare. I think the only one that I read this manga, it's called Blame, and it's like a couple hundred pages, and I think there are maybe 5 lines of dialogue in the entire thing. So it's entirely like visual storytelling.
Storytelling.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, which is really cool. And the fact that you can follow it along, you can tell what's happening, who people are, you don't know anybody's name.
Yeah.
But the fact that you can still like tell a story that means like your story is strong, your artwork is strong. And that's kind of what you want in a comic, like regardless of the text, like you still need to be able to follow along. Like I even say this, like if you watch a movie with no sound on and no subtitles, you should be able to still follow the movie minus whatever they're discussing.
Right. I don't think that pans out for a lot of movies, though.
It doesn't. It does not. Yeah. But I'm like, it should though.
It should.
It does not.
Yeah. Where did you learn that art of, I mean, I'm assuming you did with animation, learn the art of telling a story just through illustration?
Yeah, I think you learn it in storyboarding, which is how you break down each scene in panels. And I think that's where I kind of learned how to visually tell a story without, any words or any context necessarily. But yeah, storyboarding for sure.
That probably helped you get comfortable with the formatting of like the children's books and stuff like that quicker, because you had some reference point out there.
Yeah, I mean, especially because animating, the basis is the same. Like you have to do thumbnails, you have to have a script that you break down into visuals, you have to worry about your lighting, like all of those elements are pretty easy to translate to illustrating and children's books. So it wasn't like a huge leap for me to leave one for the other, to make that transition for sure.
What's the dream work? Like, what is your ideal, like, I will die happy if I get to do XYZ?
Oh, the ideal dream work. I really want to work on like a children's book on a larger like platform and scale. Like I want it worldwide bestseller. Like that's what my goal is to be on the like international bestseller list. I'll feel like I've achieved something that I've always like dreamed of. So, or being able to like walk into a bookstore and my book be like on that front display. Yeah. Yes, that is what I'm aiming for.
Are there dream authors that you want to work with?
I don't know if like necessarily authors, especially because nowadays anybody can write a book. But I do have like, there's this illustrator, her name is Vashti Harrison, and she is like my idol. Like as weird as that is, like she's not that much older than me, but like I have watched her career. She started off in animation and progressed into children's book and is like an international bestseller. And I'm like, I love everything she does. And like she's really great. So I'm like, that is my like, the somebody that I would like to emulate, basically.
Yeah,
for sure.
So watching her career, is that where you got the idea to leave animation and go into illustration?
Well, I had already left, but it definitely did inspire me to say like I can do this, and And then, just watching like at like the minute she left, then immediately going into bookstores and seeing her books in there, I was like, okay, this is doable. Like,
Right. Yeah. I'm curious about your experience, like in school, and then, when you did work in animation, and now have those spaces been representative as far as like diverse, or are they kind of all white still?
Oh, not even like the diversity is like it's one thing, and then just like being the only woman typically
Yeah.
in like your classes was another thing. Like school was rough for me. Like I will be honest, like I did not have a good time in college. I would show up, do the work, and then leave because it was just hard for me to relate to like the other kids in my class and their like life experiences. I was like, y'all haven't been through any struggles. You're not serious about this. Like I had a hard time in school. And like luckily I met my best friend there because, obviously we moved here and it was like life-changing for the both of us. But we talk about this all the time, how I don't know if like our school was necessarily the right move. I mean, it worked out for us, but it feels like a lot of kids were just getting degrees just because and not with any intention of like using them or putting any effort into it. Their parents just like were like, we'll pay for school, so you might as well go and do this thing. So that was always super frustrating in school.
I think there's definitely something there's something to that. I know I felt the same going through school, and like my um, younger sisters who are much younger than me felt the same. And I think that's because like we had, to your point, we had like some real struggles in life before we hit like college. And so when we were there, it was like, no, this is like, there's a goal. We're going to reach this goal. Like there was like intention in what we were doing. And it was frustrating to your kind of, I think maybe like to see people be around you and like have all this privilege, not realize that they had all this privilege. And so I think, like, I do think there's something to be said for the people who like don't go to school right away, who like go and do some life experience stuff before going to school, because then you have a purpose for being there. Like you're there intentionally, not just like, Hey makers, today's episode is sponsored in part by toolmomstore.com. At toolmomstore.com, you can find any and all tool-based merchandise for all genders, all sizes. They've got mugs, they've got shirts, all kinds of cool stuff. I have one of the shirts myself that has the hashtag woodworkher on it. And I also have a couple of the mugs that define what and who is a tool chick. So super excited with the merchandise that I have. I know that you will be satisfied as well. And also great discount for those of you who listen to the podcast. At checkout, if you enter the code MAKERMOM, you will get a 20% discount off any of the merchandise that you buy. So that's just toolmomstore.com. All right, let's head back into the action.
Yeah. And it was even like the difference of like the kids that worked through school versus the kids who just only did school. Like there was this one kid in my class and he's like, I finished my own short animation and I'm like gonna be the best because I'm the only one who did this. And I was like, dude, I work 40 hours a week. Like I had work this morning, class, then work again, then class. Like I have a life that is beyond this and I'm doing the best I can. But it was just like he didn't realize that he had the privilege to, even do any of those things. His parents paid for school and he didn't have to work. So I was like, cool.
Yes.
Same.
I worked 40 plus hours a week and full-time plus schedule of school.
Yeah, of school.
So I hear you there. I'm with you. It was like I got shit done when I had like 5 minutes between like work and
Yeah.
school. Get
Yeah.
shit done.
Like I'm doing the most and I'm
Yeah.
tired.
Yes.
But you had to do what you had to do. But I'm also like grateful for those experiences, like because again, it made me a very resilient person. It taught me my limits. It taught me what I'm willing to put up with and what I'm not. It taught me how to be respectful of other people's time and their space and all of that. So yeah. So that was school. And then even working for the animation studio.
Yeah.
Once again, they had minorities there, but they didn't have like a lot of women. And I like looking at the time, I was very young, so I didn't think too much about this stuff, but I'm like, looking back, I was like, the sexism just really killed me, especially because I was started off as a PA and it was like, well, you're a girl, so like we're not going to have you do this thing. And I was like, first of all, I am 6'1". Like I am like no small little woman. like what are you saying? But yeah, it taught me like that even in creative fields, there's still like that workplace drama, that like quote unquote professionalism that's led by cis white men. And I hated it. I hated it a lot. And it really felt like they were trying to like stifle like your individuality. And I didn't enjoy that aspect. And I know, some people don't have that experience, but that was enough for me to be like, I'm good, I'm gonna go my own separate way.
That's right. No, yeah, again, that totally resonates with me. My professional career has not been in the artistic field, but it has led me to, like, I work with pretty much all cishet white men. And I'm the only thing of that I am is white. So I don't have a ton in common with them. And as I've aged, especially, I've found my tolerance is less and less of.
It's non-existent at this point.
I mean, there are a few places where I honestly, I had to call my boss after being in a space and being like, just FYI, I'm getting fired from this contracted job because I could not stand there and not say something.
And I understand.
Like, you know what? I don't care anymore. I'm done caring. So I think that's definitely always been, even from a young age, like, I think I've always known about myself. Like, I don't know if it's that I'm not meant to work for somebody else, but I think I'm not meant to work for somebody else in all of the current systems that exist.
Yeah, same, very much the same. Ever since like my very first job, I definitely have had issues with like authoritative like male figures. When I will very, very clearly say when I feel like, things aren't being done correctly and wrong. And yes, it rubs people the wrong way. And sure, I've definitely gotten in trouble for it. But, at the end of the day, I don't think it should be allowed to continue. But I had to personally take myself out of those spaces, and this is why I work for myself now.
Yes.
And meet like as many like-minded people as I can, because it's just not cool.
It's not cool. It's who is it? I'm trying to think. I think her name's, maybe you know who I'm talking about, Sonia Taylor. I think that's her name.
I don't think so.
See, now I'm gonna have to double check. Yes, Sonia Renee Taylor, who's like, she's an author, activist, all these really cool things.
Mhm.
But she talks about in one of her books, which is amazing, about like just stop holding up the ladder of the system, like just walk away from it.
Yeah.
Like how freeing that could be. And I think that's definitely like where I'm at in my headspace of like, I'm not going to try so hard anymore to necessarily like actively try to dismantle the system, because I'm tired and I don't feel like that's working. Instead, I'm just going to stop holding it up by participating in it, and I'm going to go over here and do whatever
and
the hell I want to
build my own system. Build, exactly. A community of people who are willing to do things the right way. Like that's what I want to see more of. Like I don't need to work for a job and then fight my entire career to fix what's broken.
Yes.
And then not be paid equally. Like it's just so many things. I'm just like, I don't see that for myself any longer.
I have a hard time. I am definitely one who like rages against the man, in quotation marks. But I guess definitely, I'm at a point where it's like, I want to spend that energy in creating something beautiful instead of trying to like destroy something that's ugly. Because I also don't think that trying to destroy something, pointing out what's wrong with the system isn't working. Like, that's just not working. It doesn't cause change. All it causes is argument, really, just to point out what's wrong with it. Instead, it's like, well, why don't I just help create this thing that's an alternative, that's beautiful in how different it is, and say, really, like, this is what I want to build and talk about.
And really showcase, like, this is an example, a living, proven example of how you can make that work, that's definitely what I think we should work towards. Because complaining about stuff only gets you so far, unfortunately.
So how has it felt to be working for yourself?
Oh, I love it. I really love it. I mean,
are you a good boss to yourself, or sometimes a shitty boss to yourself?
Oh, but yeah, both. Absolutely. Because when you work for yourself, and I am literally financially responsible for every dollar that comes in, that means that, some days I work 6 days, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And some days I just crash and burn and I'm like, girl, take the day off, So I try to treat myself well, giving those like parameters, and take, mental health breaks, and go outside and read and meditate. And it definitely can be challenging, but like I said, I wouldn't do anything else if given the option. Like, this is a dream job for me. It's great. So,
Awesome. Do you see yourself ever like creating a space to have others work for you?
It's definitely possible. One of my dreams is to have a little shop where I teach classes and have like open events, and like not a gallery, because I don't like galleries, but like a gallery-esque space where like artists and creatives can like get together and meet up. So if in that context I hired people, then sure. But I'm more like, I would love to like hire my whole family to like work for me. My mom just did an art show yesterday for me in Chicago, and they're so supportive. And like, I would love for us to build like a legacy of like art and creativity and like whatever else, my family wants to do. Like, that's more what I would like to do.
Awesome. Now you put something out there that I have to follow back up on, which is why don't you like galleries? I have to know the answers to this.
Well, galleries, to me, a lot of galleries feel like they are holding on to like outdated ideals and systems around like art, because art is subjective, but then you're giving like a gallery like I don't want to say like the ability to like dictate that,
Yep.
and sway that. And it's hard to sell artwork in galleries. It's elitist. I don't like it.
Mhm.
Like, it's just never really been my thing. So, I mean, there are a couple of galleries that I've met and I've gone to. I'm like, okay, like this is cool. You all are doing something new and innovative. But for the most part, it just seems like where art goes to sit and get dusty. So, so,
Very well said.
yeah. Yeah.
I think all of that resonates with me. It's all
Mhm.
I'm not a fan again of the gatekeeping.
Mhm.
Like that definitely that space always feels like there's gatekeeping going on. And with that, I feel like what I hear you saying about maybe like what you would look forward to is like
Mhm.
is a focus on like community.
Community, yeah,
Yes.
definitely. It's more about like the people, and inspiring them and motivating them. Like that's more what I'm
Mm-hmm.
interested in, as opposed to like, let me show off my fancy things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't care about that stuff, but yeah. For sure.
Was that the feeling? Because you said you worked at a gallery, right?
So yeah, I worked at a art studio that had a
Okay.
gallery. It was mostly art studio though.
Okay.
And it was a little bit of that I learned there, where I was like, the gallery part does not excite me.
Yeah.
um the art studio part was rough, because you have so many personalities,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to manage that can be quite trying. uh but like, once again, like I learned a lot about being a small business owner there, which was
Mm-hmm.
amazing. So yeah. But yeah, artists are a weird variety of people. Like, just, it's crazy. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's where the arts is where it's like it's always been the misfits. Um,
Hmm.
at least that's how I always viewed it, right? It's like
Yeah.
that's why like you look at theater or art or whatever, and it's like that's where a lot of the queer community is. That's where a lot of
Hmm.
like it to me, if you want to find people who have lived like real life, like
Yeah. Go meet
real
some artists.
struggle, like I think like even if it's not something, even if it's not like artwork that you sell, like a true artist, I think is always somebody who's had real life happen to them.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
especially because it can't help but affect your art.
Mm-hmm.
When you've lived life, you've struggled, you've had adversity. I think it makes for the best art, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, you're right. Like, all the art communities I've ever been, because it's such like a mashup of like
Yeah.
creative people, you get so many different walks of life, so many different perspectives, and like so much creativity in a space is just like really inspiring. So
It
yeah.
is. It can be, I don't know, it can be to me like intoxicating to be around that much creativity. Like it always,
Hmm.
having community events always gets my brain like sparking off of like, ooh, I could do that, or I could do that, or I
Yeah.
could do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
um, we are getting close to the end of our time together. So
Yeah.
I wanted to give you an opportunity to let people know like where they should go to find you and see your work. And, if anyone's got a book out there they need illustrated, like how to
Yeah,
find you.
absolutely. So I have a website. It's JacquiCSmith.com, where you can find my portfolio. And I have a little shop on there where I sell prints and stickers, and I make coloring books. So you can find all of that there. And yes, I'm always open to illustrate children's books or portraits. I basically do everything except like text-based logos. So if you have a project in mind, just hit me up and we can talk about it. But yeah, I would love to work on projects. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for chatting with me. I'm thinking it's still very much morning there for you. So thanks for chatting with me this morning.
Well, thank you. This was awesome. This is a great interview.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So again, that was Jacqui C. Smith, and I'll include the links on how you can follow her and follow along with her work in the show notes for today's episode. Best places to find that is the description for the episode on your podcast app. If you are watching this on my Freeman Furnishings YouTube channel, check the description box down below. And lastly, you can head on over to freemanfurnishings.com/podcast and find this episode as well as all the past episodes. Be sure to follow along with the podcast over on Instagram. That's at Crafting a Revolution, all one word, no spaces, no underscores, at Crafting a Revolution. While you're there, that is the best place to find how you can support the podcast. There's links in the bio. One will take you to Patreon, so you can support on a monthly ongoing basis. There's also a link to do a one-time donation. And if you enjoy the podcast, can't support monetarily, you can also share about the podcast, and probably the biggest is to head on over to iTunes and leave a 5-star review. That really helps bump it up over on Apple Podcasts and get more ears on it. While you are there on Instagram, make sure to come over and say hi to your host, myself, Katie Freeman. You can find me at Freeman Furnishings, where I am power carving, playing with resin, dyeing wood, and shop dancing. You can find my co-host, Katie Thompson, at Women of Woodworking and at Pen and Chisel. Those are her two projects helping to diversify the woodworking field. So come on over, say hi to either one of us at Freeman Furnishings or at Women of Woodworking. This is the last episode for this week. Next week, we will be back with one brand new episode. And in the meantime, as always, let's go craft a revolution. She, her, them, they got something they want to say. Solution for the toxic masculinities. Pollution is the constant evolution of a broken institution. So here's our resolution. We craft a revolution.